begin today the Gemara at on Daf Pei Beis Amud Beis, the last line. The Gemara here brought the story that happened in the time towards the end of the second Beis Hamikdash, when there was the fight between the two brothers of the Chashmonaim, and one of the people that were with those that were outside of Yerushalayim said that as long as you're allowing them to be makriv the carbon tamid, you're not going to be able to destroy the Yidden and destroy the Beis Hamikdash. And instead, they brought up a chazer, and the whole Eretz Yisrael shook from the Chilul Hashem that there was. And the Gemara says that was the time that they instituted and said that cursed is the one that raises swines anywhere. I don't think it's only in Eretz Yisrael. B'chlal, a person should not be megadol chazerim as a result of this story. So it mentioned that this person that gave this bad advice, he was an individual that was makir b'chochmas Yevonis. He was an individual that knew the Yevonis, the Chachma Yevonis, Greek philosophy or Greek wisdom. Okay, so then it also says that in that time period they said that cursed is a person that teaches his son Chachma Yevonis. So the Gemara now asks on this: Chachmas Yevonis mi yasire? Is it actually forbidden for a person to teach his children Greek wisdom? But it says in the Braise, Amar Rebbe. Rebbe said, "Be'eretz Yisrael lashon sursi lama." In Eretz Yisrael, why are people speaking this language, which is lashon sursi? Now, lashon sursi was Aramaic with a Western dialect, and it wasn't such a beautiful language. So he's saying, why are they speaking this language of lashon sursi? Oy lashon kodesh. Why don't they speak lashon kodesh? Oy lashon Yevonis, or they should speak Greek, which is more of it's a nicer language. Yerushalmi, if I remember correctly, the Yerushalmi is written with this lashon sursi that the Gemara mentions here, which was the common language, the dialect of Aramaic that people used at that time. So that was in Eretz Yisrael. And similar, V'amar Rabbi Yosi said, or Rabbi Yosef, in Bavel, lashon Arami lama. In Bavel, why are people speaking Aramaic? There's a nicer and better language that they could be using. Oy lashon kodesh, or they should speak lashon kodesh. Oy lashon Parsi. They should speak Persian, which is a nicer language. So the point is, you see over here that Rabbi was saying that in Eretz Yisrael they should speak either Lashon Kodesh or Lashon Yevonis or Greek. But before we said that Chachma Yevonis is Aser. Amri, so they answered Lashon Yevoni L'chud and Chachmas Yevonis L'chud. The actual language, but then the Chachma, the philosophy, the Greek philosophy, that's a different thing. So it's the Greek philosophy that they said is not allowed. That's how some Mefarshim teach. Chachma Yevonis refers to Greek wisdom, Greek philosophy. But others teach that Chachma Yevonis doesn't refer necessarily to a philosophy. It refers to a certain aspect of communication, a certain Chachma and communication that's not mamish the language itself. Because it said before in the Gemara, Shahaya Makkeh b'Chachma Yevonis, and he communicated with them with this Chachma. That's what it's mashma in the Gemara. It's not exactly a philosophy. But the Gemara asks on this itself as well, Chachma Yevonis mi asire. Even Chachma Yevonis, is this forbidden? But V'hamar Rav Yudah Mashmuel Mishum Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. So Rab Shimon ben Gamliel used to say as follows: Eini oilul nafshi mikol b'nai siri. My eyes are crying from all the daughters that were in my city. And what he cried was as follows: Elef Yuladim. There were 1,000 children, 1,000 young children that were in the house from my father, that came from the family of my father. 500 of them were learning Torah. Another 500 of them were learning Chachma Yevonis. But now, and there's nothing left of all of them. It's just me that's here. Uven achi abba, and a cousin of mine, which is Ba'asya, that's living in Asya, just the two of us. Everyone else was wiped out. And then another place the Gemara says, this was in the story we learned in Gittin, where the city of Beitar was all wiped out, and they were all killed over there. So you see over here that he's saying that he had from his family the 500 the youngsters that were learning Chachma Yevonis. So if so, you see that it is allowed to study Chachma Yevonis. So Amri, they said about that, Shani Beis Rabban Gamliel, the house of Rabbi Gamliel, they're an exception, because they were close to the government. And therefore, for those that were close to the government for a certain purpose, they're allowed to learn Greek philosophy. With the Tanya, as we learned in the Braise, a similar concept, Hamisaper Kumi, person that lets his hair grow long. This is actually referring to someone that lets his hair grow long, a ponytail. That's following the ways of the Amayrim, the Goyim, and it's not allowed. The Isra of this is basically, the Goyim used to let their hair grow long as a sign of connection to Avodah Zarah. But even if you're not doing it for that purpose, but if you're doing it with the intention to be similar to the style of the way Goyim dress, or the way the Goyim let their hair grow, so that's also b'chokiseim lo yiselechu. You're not allowed to go and follow in their conduct. But nevertheless, Avtulmus Baruvin, a fellow by the name of Avtulmus Baruvin, he tiru le'lesaper kumi. They allowed him to have a ponytail, because he was close to the government, and therefore for him to be able to have influence and not to be looked down at, they allowed him to have a ponytail. And Shal Beis Rabbi Gamliel, and similar in the house of the people by Rabbi Gamliel, he tiru lehem l'saper b'chachma Yavanis. They allowed them to study and to learn or to speak with his chachma Yavanis, mipnei shekreivim l'malchus, because they also were close to the government. So the Mefarshim explained regarding this, that when they gave this heter him to grow a ponytail, even though it seems to be an ism in atayra, it's an isra of b'chokiseim le'isileichu. So some say because he was in a position where it was atzalas nefashis, he used to intercede on Yidden's behalf to save them from all kinds of decrees. Another thing is that some say that the whole Isra, there is no Isra Minatayra here. The Isra is you're doing it for the purpose that you want to assimilate and be like the Goyim. But if you're doing it for the purpose of a certain position that you're in and you're not looking to be similar to the Goyim at all, then the Isra Minatayra does not apply, and then the Chacham allowed him to do it. Going back to what it said in the Mishnah, Lo yigadol olam es hakelev, a person shouldn't raise a dog, elam ken kosher b'shal shelo yischulu, unless he ties it with a chain. So in Abraisa we learned lo yigadol adam es hakelev elam ken kosher b'shal sheles. Person should not raise a dog unless he ties it by a chain. Aval megadlo b'ira smucha l'sfar. You are allowed to have a dog, raise a dog in a city that's close to the border, because this is needed to protect the people that are by the border that could be attacked by goyim around. V'kaishrei b'yayim. During the daytime you tie it so it shouldn't attack people. Umatirei b'layla. And then nighttime, you can let it go loose, that it should go around the city to protect the people. Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Gadol said, the Megadol Klovim, person that raises dogs, can Megadol Chazirim. It's like he raises swines. L'maynaf kimina, what's the relevance of this comparison? It says, the Gemara L'meikim aleh ba'orah. To say, like we said before, that when they made the decree not to be Megadol Chazir, there was a order, there was a curse that they said. So too here, regarding a person that raises a dog and he doesn't tie him to a chain, he's also has the same curse. What's the relevance of this comparison? What's Amar Rav Yosef bar Minyami, Amar Rav Nachman, Bavel ki'ir asmucha l'sfar dami. In Bavel, it's like a city that's on a border because it's surrounded by goyim, and therefore there you're allowed to have a dog that you let loose at night. Tirgum, they translated that what Rav Nachman meant to say, this was Nerdah. This was regarding the city of Nerdah, which on one side had a border that was with a lot of goyim there. Darish Rab Dustoi the Mimbiri. Dustoi from Biri Darshan regarding a person that raises a dog. So he says interesting thing. Pasuk says Uvenucha Yoimar. When he rests, when the Yidden would travel and then the Yidden would rest, the Pasuk says Shuva Hashem Rivavais Alf Yisrael. The Eibusha should return to the tens of thousands of Yidden. Now, what's the number over here specifically that it says? Lilametcha, the expression of the pasuk when it says Rivavais, plural term, Alfe, also a plural term. So this teaches you She'ein Shchina Shoyr Al Yisrael Pachas Mishnei Alafim Mishnei Revavis. The Shechina does not dwell upon Yidden unless there's twice Rivavais. So that's or Rivavais, which is plural. So Rivavais is 10,000. Rivava, that is 10,000. Rivavais is 20,000. And then Alafim, Alaf is 1,000. Alafim is 2,000. So it means it has to be 22,000 Yidden. That's where you have the presence of the Shechina in a very powerful way. So now, if it's Chaser Achas, if it's just missing one Yid for that number of 22,000. And there's a pregnant woman amongst them. Now this number, by the way, of 22,000, what's the significance of this number, 22,000? So Mefarshim say that when you look at the Shvatim that were counted, and when they were in the Midbar, and they were talking about when the Yidden were traveling in the Midbar, so the smallest Shevet that was counted was Shevet Levi, which was 22,000, about 22,000. So therefore, that's the number that the Eibusher dwells upon one Shevet, 22,000. So if you have all Yidden, or if you have a number of Yidden together, which are 21,000, it's missing one to 22,000. And there's one woman which is pregnant. V'ru'uya lahashlim. And since she's pregnant, so she now has a baby that can finish that number of 22,000 to bring the Shechina. V'novach bo kelev, and a dog comes and barks, and as a result, v'yipilos, she miscarries, nimtza zeh geirum l'shchina shetistalk miYisrael. So having that dog that barks and causes this miscarriage, it causes the shchina to be removed from Yidden. So the main reason why a person shouldn't raise a dog which is not on a leash, which is not tied with chains, is because not to bark and not to cause a woman to miscarry. And the relevance of that is not stam, the miscarriage itself is a terrible thing, but over here it's saying that this is also regarding the presence of the shchina that it takes away from Yidden. The Gemara brings a story about this. There was a woman, woman that came into a certain home to bake her bread there. So there was a dog there that the homeowner had that was not on a leash and came and barked at her, and she got very afraid. The homeowner says to her, don't be afraid of him, he's not going to attack you, because his teeth, the sharp teeth that he has, were removed, and therefore he can't attack you. But she said to him, it's too late. Shkili tu vusech, take your favors, v'shadya chizri, throw it on the thorns. Kfar nod vlad, the fetus, the baby, already moved out of its position and already killed the pregnancy, and this the damage was already caused. So you see that a wild dog, not on a leash, can cause such kind of damage. Going back again to the Mishnah, it said, "Ein person nishvin liyayin v'chulu." You're not allowed to spread out traps to trap doves inside a city, because you can be trapping other people's doves that are owned by people. So you have to go out. The Mishnah said, "Shloishim ris." You have to go out 30 ris, which is 4 mil. And every mil is 2,000 amas. That's how far you have to go out from the city, and there you can place your traps. Do the doves of the city fly out so far that you have to go so far out if you want to trap doves? The 30 ris, which I mentioned again, is 4 mil. So why so far out? But Vatanan, in another Mishnah we learned, that when you're setting up dove cuts, so you should go away from the city 50 amma, and that what this Mishnah in Bava Basra, what's talking about over there is, if people have fields and gardens, and you don't want the birds to eat and to ruin their gardens, so you have to go away 50 amas so that they shouldn't fly into the gardens. So you see over there 50 amas, that's the distance that it flies, that's far enough. So why over here we're saying that you can't place your traps unless it's 30 ris, which is much more than 50 amas, 4 times 2,000 amas, outside the city. Amar Abaye, so Abaye answers as follows. It's a different subject, because over here we're talking about not to trap anyone's private birds. So Meishit Shaiti Tuve. These birds can fly very, very far. So they can even fly out 4 mil outside the city. So you have to only place your traps outside that distance. But on the other hand, though, in the Mishnah in Bava Basra, where it's talking about not placing your birds far enough that they shouldn't eat from anybody's produce, if you place your dovecots outside the city 50 amas, so even if they're flying back, within that distance, they already find other things to fill their stomachs with, and they're not going to come and eat from the produce of people's cities, of people's fields in the city. But the Gemara now still asks on this, it's an opposite question actually here. Are you telling me that the private birds that belong to people in the city, so they fly out and they fly around, they only fly 30 ris outside the city and not any further than this? But Vatanya, in a Braisi we learned, B'Yishov, there's a settled area, mil, even 100 mil outside the city, lo yifreis. You shouldn't spread out traps, because the birds that are privately owned fly around, and they even fly up to 100 mil, not just 30 ris, which is 4 mil. And says the Gemara, Rav Yosef says, B'Yishuv Kromim. That price is talking about when outside the city you have a bunch of these different vineyards along the way, so therefore the bird can fly much further, because it can rest in one vineyard to another vineyard, and like this it can travel, and it could fly even 100 mil. Rabba says B'Yishuv Shevchen, that if it's outside the city, there are a bunch of different dovecots where it rests along the way when it flies, so therefore it can go out very, very far. But our Mishnah is talking about when you don't have any of this, so therefore it says the shear is 4 mil, 30 this. Correct the Gemara on the last answer that Rabbi said, if you're telling me that there are additional dovecots over here outside the city, so for them itself, they are privately owned, so for this itself you have to distance it further away. Why the Bryce is saying that you have to go away 100 mil from the city, but you're telling me along the way there are additional private dovecots that are there, so you have to go away from them themselves. not just from the city. Maybe 100 mil from them, maybe. But why are you saying that it's from the city 100 mil? There's additional dovkats along the way. So the Gemara answers, even if there are additional dovkats along the way, either those dovkats are owned by goyim. So since they're owned by goyim, so there's no concern about trapping them or so on. It's also a discussion in Mepharshim about this, exactly why not. Some say that when you trap from goyim, so b'chlal to trap from what belongs to people, there's no real isser of gzeila over here. This whole concept that it says that you're not allowed to put out traps in order not to trap these birds, it's not really an inyan of gzeila. So therefore from goyim it's allowed. Others say b'dehefker. There are other dovkats over there, but it's all hefker. It's all ownerless. So it's not. That's not the issue. The issue is from the yishuv, from the city itself. What it meant to say is this person himself that is putting out the traps. Those dovkats along the way outside the city are his. So because of them, there's no concern of him putting any dovkats. It's from the settled area where there's other people that have birds that are flying around that he has to distance himself not to trap any of those birds. Hadron alach merube, we shall return to you, Perek merube, the 7th Perek of Masechta Bava Kama. Okay, begin the 8th Perek, Perek HaChoyval. This Perek comes back to a subject that we learned already before in this Masechta many times regarding one person that injures another. So here the Torah says that you don't only pay for the actual damage, but you have to pay, there's 5 different parts of payment. Nezek, Tsar, Ripui, Sheves, and Baishis. As we'll see right over here, this Mishnah will specify the various different aspects of payment when you injure another person. If a person injures his friend. Right, so we're talking over here about such a kind of an injury that could include also, there are various different, I was going to speak about Arichas in this Perek about all the different kinds of cases, but an injury that could include even cutting a person, some limb of a person's body, amputating them. So in such a, chayev olav mishum chamisha dvarim. So you chayev to pay 5 different things. Benezek, the damage, which the Mishnah will explain everything. B'tsar, the pain that's caused. B'ripui, the healing, the doctor bills. B'sheves, the fact that he can't work. And ubaishes, and the embarrassment that you cause him. Says the Mishnah, B'nezek, how do you evaluate damage? If you're going to come and ask a person, B'nezek Ketzah that is, how do you evaluate this? If you come ask a person, how much money should I pay you for you to be ready for me to cut off a finger, to cut off a hand, God forbid. There's no money in the world that can pay for that. So over here, if you're going to evaluate that way, then you're going to have to pay an exorbitant amount of money. So the Mishnah says you evaluate this differently. You evaluate the result of the damage and the value of this person's body. And that is as follows. If you blinded a person's eye, kites yadoi, or you cut off a hand, or shibes ragla, he broke his foot. So you evaluate, you see him as if he would be a slave that's being sold in the marketplace. And v'shamin kama hoya yafa v'kama hu yafa. And you evaluate how much would someone be ready to pay for him as a slave with the hand or before he had this injury, and how much is his value going down now after this injury. That's the difference in the damage of this person. That's the nezek. Okay, some say that the Eved that it's talking about over here, Rashi actually mentions Eved Ivri, but it's a little bit difficult to understand because Eved Ivri is only sold for 6 years. So it doesn't give you really the full picture of what the damage here is. But the others say that it means Eved Ivri, Rashi didn't mean Mamash Eved Ivri. Eved Ivri that would be sold forever, like an Eved Kanani. And then you can see what the decrease of the value of his body is if he would be bought by someone as an Eved. Tsar, how do you evaluate the pain that you cause, that you have to pay for this? Kvoi b'shpud, if you burn someone with a hot iron, or b'masmer, or with a nail, a metal nail, and this is even if it's on his nail, on the person's fingernail, and there is no real injury that is caused by the person. What the Mishnah is trying to say is, you pay for tsar even if there is no damage and there's no other things that you have to pay for. It's just for the tsar itself you have to pay. And how do you evaluate this? How much would another person that's similar to this person that you caused this pain to, Not everybody is the same. Rashi explains some people, you have to see, it has to be someone else that's similar to this person. How much would he be ready to pay to allow someone to go and burn him on his fingernail? That's the value. Ripui. How do you evaluate the medical bills? Hikahu, if you injure someone, chayiv l'rapaisai. So you have to pay for all the bills that there are to heal him. Now, if as a result of your injury, so there are blisters that he has now in this area. So if it's as a result of this injury, chayiv, so then you have to pay for those blisters as well. If there are blisters that he gets, but it's not a result of this injury, then potter. Then you don't pay for that. Now, chaysa v'nistara, if this injury began healing, but then it went back to the way it was, or chaysa v'nistara happened again, it was healing, but then it went back, chayav l'rapaisa, you're also obligated to pay for this healing, because it's all a result of this injury that you caused. Now, but however, chaysa kol tzarka, if it healed completely, then ena chayav l'rapaisa. Then you don't have the obligation to pay for if it later came back, because it didn't come back. It's something new that happened. It has nothing to do with the injury that you caused. Sheves, how do you pay for the fact that this person now can't work? He's unemployed because of this injury. Raya naisai, we see this person, we consider him ki'ilu hushaymek shuin, as if he would be someone that could do just a very simple job to be a watchman for a garden that's growing cucumbers. But now that he's ill and he can't even do this either. So you pay him during this time period for the fact that he could only do, that he can't even do this work as a watchman for the cucumbers. Now the Mishnah explains, isn't this person someone that may have been able to do much more than that? Well, not now maybe that you amputated his leg or you did something to him and he can't do any more. Yes, but why are we only evaluating his unemployment on such a low and basic level of doing such a kind of a job? So the Mishnah explains, the payment of the damage that we mentioned before, that you already paid him. Before you amputated his legs, he was able to do a job in a very high level, and now he's only able to do this basic job. So that you already paid him. When we evaluated how much his value went down, when a person would want to buy him as an eved, that was paid already. But now though, in this time period, when he can't even do this basic job, when he's still being healed, now you have to pay for that unemployment as well. Baishas, how do you evaluate the embarrassment? The baishas hakol lefi ha'mavayish v'hamispayish. You have to evaluate it. The baishas is not evaluated just one equal amount. It's based on who is the one that's embarrassing you. If it's someone that's a very simple person that's embarrassing you, so then it's not such a big embarrassment. But if it's a prominent person that comes and embarrasses you, that's a much bigger embarrassment. And the same thing also with the mizbayish, the one that gets embarrassment. It's not the same. Every person that takes it and is on a different level of how he gets embarrassed. Those are the 5 things of payment when you cause a person an injury. Rashi brings the psukim for all this. Ayin tachasayim, petza tachas petza, then it says verape yerape, and shifta yiten, v'katzay says kappa, but there's the psukim that Rashi brings for all these 5 things. We had it already earlier in the Masechta. Okay, now here the Gemara discusses the fundamental thing about this payment for injury, which is always brought in Shas, but here's the source to explain that how do we know that you actually only pay money for this? In the Torah it says ayin tachasayin, eye for an eye. How do you know that eye for eye does not mean literally? That if you knock out someone's eye, that you should knock out your eye? Like the Gemara, Amai, why are we only paying money for the injury? Ayin tachasayin om rachmone. The Torah says eye for an eye. Emai mamish. Maybe that means that you have to knock out the eye of the person that knocked out someone else's eye. Says the Gemara, no, loisal kedaitach. No, that can't be true. Because the Tanya, as we learned in the Braisa, Yochel, I would think, Sime eseinoi, if you blinded someone, so in return you blind his eye. Kites yada, you amputated his hand. Mikatees yadai, so you amputate your hand. Shives ragloi, you broke his foot. Mishaves ragloi, so you break the foot of this person. So the Braisa says, no, that can't be. So because we learn out, we compare. Talmud Leimer, the pasuk says, Makke Adam umakke behema. It says when you injure a person, and it also says Makke behema, when you hurt an animal. And we compare the two. Just like when you hurt or you injure an animal, so you're just paying for the value of this. So too, if you injure another person, it's money that you pay for this. But there's no eye for eye in the literal sense. The Gemara is soon going to explain exactly where it says makad and because there is no pasuk where Mamish says clearly in the Seifin. We'll see. Now the Braisa continues and says, "Ve'im nafshach loima." If you're going to want to say that this Gzeira Shava, this comparison, we can't learn out from here. And the Gemara will explain that also. Why would we say that we can't learn out from here? Harei Oimer, there's another pasuk I can learn this out from. It says by a person that's a murderer, do not accept any payment from this person that murdered. Ashu Rasha, he's a Rasha, Lamos, Lenefesh Lamos, that is. Ashu Rasha Lamos. He's a Rasha that has to be put to death. So what it's saying is a person that's a murderer, so then he's Chayiv Misa. So we learn from this, there's no payment for a person that's a Ritzeyach. But when someone injures someone, even when he injures him, that he knocks out a tooth or eye rather, or he cuts off a hand or something which will not return, but still over there's only payment. You don't return and do the same thing back to him. Till is the Braisa. Now the Gemara explains what exactly was the Gzeira Shava. This is all based on psukim in the end of Parshas Emor. There's a few different psukim over there that talks about the subject. The Gemara is going to go through over here these different psukim. Says the Gemara, Hi Makkah. Which words of Makkah did it said before? Makkah Adam, Makkah Behema. Where exactly is the Gzeira Shava? If you're going to say that it's a pasuk there that says Makkah Behema Yishalmena. When you injure an animal, you have to pay for its value. And then it says afterwards, Makkah Adam, you must, that if you hit a person, that you die. So in that pasuk, we're comparing the two to say that by a person, when you injure another person, that it's only a payment. Says the Gemara, that can't be the comparison. Why not? How biktaliksid? That pasuk, when it says Makkah Adam, it's actually speaking about a person that's chayiv misa. And Rashi here brings that. Does Rashi bring it over here? Or maybe the Mefarshim say it. Remember, that pasuk is talking about a person that hits a father, God forbid, and in such a case, he's actually chayiv misa. So it's not talking about what we're talking about here, which is when you injure someone else. So that can't be the Gzeira Shava. Ella says the Gemara Mehacha. The Gzeira Shava is from Psukim earlier there in that parsha, where it says Makkah nefesh be'em yishalmena nefesh tachas nefesh. That when you hit an animal, so you have to pay for it, nefesh tachas nefesh. And over there it means money, not the nefesh tachas nefesh in the literal sense, but you just pay for the value of this animal that you caused the damage. And the the next pasuk there it says, if you cause a blemish in your friend's body, like he did, should be done back to him. So we compare the two and say, just like by Makkah Nefesh, it's you pay money, so too Ken Yasaloi is also money. This is the Gzeira Shava. But the Gemara says, Hai Lav Makkahu. But we said in the Braise, what's the Gzeira Shava? That it says the term Makkah by an animal, and it says the term Makkah when a person injures someone else. But over here, it says Yitem Mum Ba'misa. It says Yitem Mum. It doesn't say the term Makkah. So how can you make this Gzeira Shava? So the Gemara says, even though the Braise uses the term Makkah, it doesn't mean that it literally says the word Makkah. Haka ka amrinan. What it means to say is there are two psukim that speak about a person hitting either an animal or hitting a person. So even though it's not the same word, we can still use that as the Gzeira Shava. Just like the hitting that it says by an animal, it's payment. So too by a person, the term haka over here is also for tashlumin, for payment. Right, so Rashi here brings, we find this in other places. Rabbi Shmuel says, we had it earlier in the Masechta here also, a Gzeira Shava doesn't always have to be literally the exact same word that we compare. When you see two times the Torah speaks about something and it says a similar concept, you could also compare and make a Gzeira Shava. Yitain mum, placing a blemish in a person's body, is by hitting him. So it's the same concept. We can make a Gzeira Shava. But there's yet another pasuk there that it says in that parsha. V'aksiv, the pasuk there says, Ish ki yake kol nefesh adam, person that hits any other person, mois yumas, that he should die. Now the Gemara understands that obviously mois yumas doesn't mean that you have to kill, that there's a chi of misa for someone that just injures someone. So then what does the mois yumas mean? The Gemara is asking that mois yumas seemingly would mean like what the pasuk says, ayin tachas ayin, eye for an eye. If you took out the power, you caused death to his eye, so too to the injurer, it should be caused death to his eye as well. So the Gemara says no, b'mamin. That when that pasuk says mois yumas, it just means by payment of money. Says the Gemara, how do you know it means money? The Torah says the term mais yumas. How do you know it just means money? Maybe it means literal death, that you do eye for an eye. Says the Gemara, that can't be. Number one, we already said the Gzeira Shava before. We have the Gzeira Shava that teaches us to compare when a person injures another person to when he injures an animal. Another thing, Ksiv Basrei. After that pasuk that we just quoted, where it says "V'ishki yaken kol nefesh adam mois yumas," the pasuk afterwards says "Kasha yite mum ba'adam kein yinasim vay." That just like what you gave to this person, what you did to this person, so should be given to him. Ushmamina mami. This expression of kein yinasim vay, the Torah is using this term of nesina. The term nesina means something which is given. Given refers to money. From this we know that it means money. This is the pshat in the Braisa, this is Gzeri Shava, this is the meaning of the psukim, as I mentioned in the end of Parshas Emor, where you see this thing that's only payment of money and not eye for eye, literally. Now the Braisa though said, Im nafshach loymar. If you're going to say that you can't learn from here, then it has a different source. It says the Gemara, Ma'im nafshach loymar. Why can't you learn from here? That the Braisa is saying, Ma'im nafshach loymar su kakashi le'letane, because the Tana has the following question on this drasha. What's the question? Why are you comparing what it says when a person injures someone else to when he injures an animal? Why do you compare to what it says by Maka Adam? There's the Maka Adam when one kills another and he's a murderer, and then you do take his life, then he is Chayiv Misa. So maybe I should say that similar. When one injures another and takes one limb of his body, so also you should take his limb. It should be literally eye for eye. Maybe you should compare in that way. In the same parsha, you have an option to compare it to Makkah Behemah or compare it to Makkah Adam. So maybe we should compare it to Makkah Adam. So the Gemara says, no, that can't be the question that the Braisa was asking, because Donin Nizakim and Nizakim, Vein Donin Nizakim Mimisa. It makes more sense to compare one case of injury to another case of injury, and not to compare a case of injury to a case where you killed another person. But the Gemara says, no, Adarab, on the contrary, Donin Adam Adam, Vein Donin Adam Behemah. It would be more logical to compare one case where you affected another person, whether by injury or by killing him, than to compare what you do to a person to what you do to an animal. So therefore, it's not clear who to compare it to. Therefore, the Gemara says, Hainu diktani im nafshach loymar. That's what the Braisa says, that if you're going to argue and say that the comparison to injuring an animal is not the right comparison, instead compare it to when you kill another person, so then I'll tell you that we have another source that when you knock out someone's eye or any injury you cause, that you don't do the same thing to him. Where's the source for this? That only by a murderer do you not take any payment, but rather he's chayiv misa. But a person that knocks out someone's any of his limbs, so then for that you take payment. That's what you learn out from this pasuk. So the Gemara asks on this, that pasuk is actually used for a different drasha. You're telling me it's coming to say that we exclude in a case where he didn't kill, but the person just knocked out one limb, so you don't do back the same thing to him. Is that what it's coming to teach? But we actually need this pasuk for something else. Here the Torah is telling us regarding a murderer, that for this Reitzayach, you don't do two things. He doesn't have to pay, and also is chayiv misa. Only one thing, he's chayiv misa, that's all. That's what you learn from here. Says the Gemara, no, hi, michdei rish asay nafke. That we learn out from a different pasuk, where the pasuk says, kedei rish asay, we had this before already in the Masechta, which we learn from here, risha achas ata mechayev, vieta mechayev shtei rishiyos. You give a person one punishment, and there are no two punishments. So he's only chayiv misa, and you don't make him pay either. So the pasuk that we brought, leisikchu kaifel and nefesh reitzayach, that's an extra pasuk coming to teach me that you don't apply the same thing when you only injured someone with one limb of his body. But don't you still need this? That the Torah is coming to say, you may have thought, when you have a murderer and he's chayiv misa, what if he comes and offers you $5 million? And he says, I'll pay instead of you giving me the chayiv of misa. You're not allowed to accept any payment to pata from the misa. That's what this pasuk is coming to say. So it's still not an extra pasuk. Says the Gemara, no, there is a word here that's extra. Because im kain lichtav rachmane leisikchu kaifer la'ashahu rasha lamos. Don't take any payment from this murderer because he's a rasha and he has to be put to death. L'nefesh reitzayach lamali. This term of nefesh, why does it have to say this extra word of nefesh for his soul? Shmami no, l'nefesh reitzayach yat lekech kaifer. This is a murderer that he killed someone completely, and he took away his whole life, and therefore his nefesh also has to be taken away. For him, you can't take any payment. However, if it's not a full nefesh, you just injured someone with one limb of his body, over there, you do it to take payment, and he has to pay. Says the Gemara, okay, so now that we have the source of this pasuk, now we have the source over here that you take payment from a person that injured someone. So make lamali, the Gzeira Shavah that the Braisa brings, that we could learn out also to compare the terms of make that it says. What do I need that for? So Amri, they answer, they actually need both of these, because if it was only one drasha, this drasha was saying here, have a minute, I would think to say that maybe iboy einay nasiv v'iboy dmei einay nasiv. That maybe it's a choice. When a person injures someone, knocks out an eye, either he pays the value of the eye, as we've said before, how you evaluate that, or maybe he has the option that his eye itself gets knocked out. If he doesn't afford it, or he can't afford it, and he doesn't want to pay, or some actually say that maybe the choice would be in the hands of the Bezdin, or in the hands of the person that got injured. He can say either I want payment, or I want that it should be done to him like what he did to me. That's what I would think. It's an option. That's why we had compared to when you injure an animal, just like when one injures an animal, there's no option about this. It's a payment of money. You don't do it back to the person himself. And so too when you injure another person, so the payment for the injury is only payment. There's no option of anything else.